Several years ago, on a cold December day, I found myself standing in a cotton field in Jonestown, Mississippi. And it was so cold, I had to do a little dance between the furrows to keep myself warm. And I was having difficulty getting a cell phone signal. And I was trying to call my dad all the way back in Oregon to get some advice about how to sheetrock a house. I'd never done it before, really. But finally, I got through to him and I got the advice that I needed. And I turned around and I scrambled back to the group of 10 high school kids that I was with to give them some advice about what to do. We were in Jonestown to help build a house for Habitat for Humanity. Over the course of the entire week, we actually managed to insulate and sheetrock an entire house, and the students ingratiated themselves into the community. And at the end of the week, there was a celebratory dinner where, for the first time in my life, I ate raccoon. The adventure was transformative for the kids, and we came back to Lake Oswego, and they told stories to everyone in the community, to parents, other students, teachers, and administrators. 2 local papers wrote full-page stories about the experience that the students had. And they were so energized and so inspired that they decided that they'd get grant funding together and find another teacher and go back down to Jonestown to work on the house. The second time that they went down, however, when they arrived at the house, they quickly realized that no new construction had occurred on the house. No windows had even been installed, and when they looked inside, they saw that the sheetrock was molding and rotting. Now, anyone with any construction experience would know you don't sheetrock and insulate a house until after the plumbing and the wiring and the windows have been installed. We just didn't have that level of expertise. We had really good intentions. And what became a very inspiring story for me as a civics teacher became a cautionary tale. And it brought me back to a question that I often ask myself. I've been teaching a class called Political Action Seminar for over 10 years at Lake Oswego High School to juniors and seniors. And the question is, when it comes to young citizens, what are the knowledge and skills that they need in order to be effective and productive citizens in the 21st century? Not only in the future, but in the present. When we think of a traditional civics education for most students, we think of a classroom, we think of desks and rows and a textbook, a lecture by a teacher, and maybe a test at the end of the chapter. It's not a very inspiring story. Maybe teachers might throw in something cool like a mock trial role play or take their kids on a field trip to Model United Nations. They might be able to have very engaging current events discussions, introduce kids to other youth citizens that are role models like Emma Gonzalez or Greta Thunberg or Malala Yousafzai. But even with all that effort, I've always been concerned that civics education and creating young citizens is an academic abstraction for students, and really citizenship and engaged citizenship in a democratic society is practiced by adults. So Political Action Seminar tried to change the narrative. In that class, I created a workshop model for kids, and when I think about the successful things that happen in Political Action Seminar with youth citizens, I think of stories like Nikki and Melissa, who in 1999 were very moved by the school shootings at Thurston High School and by Columbine. So they invited Oregon state legislators from both sides of the aisle to come to our school and have a panel discussion. And using that information, they had a town hall meeting where we looked at our own local community under a microscope. We invited parents and students and administrators and teachers, and we sat around at tables and we had discussions about how we could mitigate the possibility of school violence. The girls went on to actually organize a march through downtown Portland against school violence, and then went to Washington, D.C. and met with congressional leaders to help draft a resolution condemning school violence. All of that they managed to do in 2 years. But when I really think about what they did that was most effective is before they left, they instituted a program at our school called Link Crew, which is a national program that you might have heard of, where upperclassmen act as mentors to ninth graders as they enter the high school. And then they maintain that relationship throughout the school year so that no single freshman will ever feel marginalized or undervalued. And that program has endured for 20 years at our high school and completely changed the culture of how ninth graders are ingratiated into our school community. I'm also reminded of another program that students initiated. A group of students put together a tutoring program for refugee families at a housing project called Kateri Park in Portland, Oregon. These students partnered with Catholic Charities, and they created cohorts of volunteer students who got trained, and then every single day throughout the school year, these cohorts would arrive at Kateri Park and help kindergarten through 12th grade students with their schoolwork and their homework. The students on that planning team also got together and got grant funding to provide more chairs and tables and school supplies for the kids. All of those kids have long since graduated. Honestly, I don't even teach political action seminar anymore. But the amazing thing is that every single year at the start of the school year, some student walks into my classroom who I've never seen before, and they say, I'm here for the Kateri Park tutoring program. I'm going to be leading it this year. Can you help me? When we think about young citizens, I want us to pause for a minute and imagine the power of that. A program has endured with no teacher, no class, no advisor, no organized club for over 15 years at our high school because it's become so much a part of the culture of the high school. So when I talk about civic action and when I talk about youth citizens, I'm really talking about challenging us to rethink the model of civics education. And I have 3 ideas for what I think are going to be most effective. And these are 3 things that I practiced in political action seminar with my students. The first one is that the teacher has to let go of the control in the classroom. The power dynamic has to change. And for some of us, that puts us in a real position of vulnerability. Every single year in my political action seminar class, the curriculum was different because it was driven by the students. So what's my role in the classroom then? In this workshop where all these students are engaged in these different projects, I become a partner to them. I provide them adult guidance and adult counsel on things that I think will work and won't work. And most importantly, I try and advocate on their behalf with adult members of the school community, adult members in the greater community, in order to make sure that their goals can be met for their project. But teachers, I want us to really understand we don't have to know everything about government and politics and history to effectively teach our students how to become youth citizens. We don't need to be a sage on the stage. We need to partner with kids in a collaborative way. The second thing about political action seminar, which has led to all these productive projects that students have done that have had an enduring legacy on our school culture, is that I've really encouraged students to think about local action versus academic abstraction. We should be electrifying our kids in their local community and having them look at their local community with a microscope. They should be seeking out every opportunity to work collaboratively together on relevant problems in their local community that make sense to them. And then they can partner with adult members of the school community, other teachers and administrators to seek out how to perhaps change the dynamic of the school culture, or even more exciting, they can be partnering with adults in the greater community and working in those partnerships to achieve goals that are positive and effective and enduring. The last thing, the third thing that I think is really, really important if we want our students to become engaged citizens in our democratic society is when we engage students in this way, we want to do it with an eye towards sustainability. And I find myself asking questions to my kids about their ideas. Sometimes they come up with brilliant and creative ideas, but there are three things that I always have to have them consider. And the first one is, are you flying too far? Have you created a program that's so far flung that the daily constructive work that's required of this program in order to be effective has been forfeited to some organization or agency that's working miles and miles away? In those cases, oftentimes that work can be easily abandoned or dismissed by students. The other question I have to ask them is this program vulnerable to indifference? Is this something that in a couple of years students won't see the value of, and it will begin to just dissipate and disintegrate? And finally, when we think about sustainability, is it possible that what they want to do can be too easily picked apart or dismissed by adults that are engaged in powerful and influential positions in the school or the community? If any of those things go awry, we'll find ourselves in that situation where we're looking at an abandoned house with rotting sheetrock. So in order to instill in our students a desire to be youth citizens, and in order to teach them the knowledge and skills necessary in order to be productive citizens in the 21st century, we should shift the power dynamic as we rethink the model of civics education so that we can place students directly in the capacity to make change collaboratively with each other. In that way, they'll see themselves as something engaged in a project that's larger than themselves. And secondly, they will do something that's transformative and will have an enduring impact on their community. Thank you.